Growing up in a rabbi's house has some perks. And as I grew up in a rabbi's house in upstate New York, one of those perks that you may not think is a perk is that when a scholar came to town, they would often stay at the rabbi's house. And so instead of just hearing beautiful intellectual lectures at the synagogue, you in fact had some more intimate, engaging conversations around your Shabbat table. And one of those people that I'll never forget coming over to our home was Rabbi Resnikov. Besides the title of ordained rabbi from the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, Rabbi Resnikov is also a retired captain in the United States Navy. He served in Vietnam, and he was present in Beirut when 241 Americans were killed by a suicide truck bomb. He also served as the official commander of the 6th Fleet visit to Israel, where he hosted the first interfaith service at the Kotel of the Western Wall and a service honoring Martin Luther King Jr. in the residence of the President of the State of Israel. But besides all of his accolades and accomplishments in the Navy, one thing that he told us around that Shabbat table always stuck with me. He said, you know, today, many of us know more people serving in the Israeli Defense Force than we do in the United States military. But he said, even if there was not one Jew serving in the United States military, he still find it critical and crucial that chaplains, specifically rabbis, Jewish chaplains, would have a voice at the table. Because he said in times of war and in times of peace, the Jewish perspective is one that needs to be in the conversation. You know, when times are tough, you often see on social media or even when we say to each other, my thoughts and my prayers are with you. We've all said that. But this morning, both on Parshat Korach and the Shabbat of July 4th, I want to reclaim that phrase of our thoughts and prayers are with you to what it means to us either as Jewish Americans or American Jews. We can save that sermon for next July 4th. But as Jews who live in this country of the United States. First, our Parsha. In Parshat Korach, we read and learn of the famous rebellion of 250 people with Korach, basically don't like Moses' leadership and try to take him down. But the important aspect is not about the rebellion, but Moses' reaction to those 250 individuals. In Hebrew, it's 3 words. Vayipol al panav. Moses falls on his face. Commentators have a heyday with that, figuring out why did Moses do that and what it really means. Rashi says it's simple. Moses was in fear. He had a sense of powerlessness, and the only thing he could do was basically faint. He fell to the ground. But even Ezra, I think, has a more powerful point. Ibn Ezra says that when a prophet is about to have a prophecy, Vayipol al panav, they fall to the ground. Meaning they pray. They have thoughts and they have prayers. In the Avodah service of Yom Kippur, when most of us are not here at that time, the cantor and the rabbi come up before the ark and 3 times bow to the ground. And the words that are said are, V'noflim al panehem, that they fall to the ground. Because what Moses does after is that he is able to compose himself, figure out a plan, but only after Vayipol al panav, that he falls to the ground, and as Ibn Ezra says, prays. And I think if it can work for Moshe, it can probably work for us too. This past week, Rabbi Guzik and I traveled down to San Diego, thanks to Camp Ramah having 2 of our children, and thanks to Grandma and Grandpa having the 3rd. And in San Diego, we had a little bit of R&R, rest and relaxation, but right outside of our hotel was docked the USS Midway. If you've been to San Diego, you've probably seen it. And instead of just admiring its grandeur from the outside, we decided to take a tour inside. We learned a lot. On the upper flight deck, we learned how planes take off and land on a very short runway, all different types of jets. Over the 50 years, from 1945 to 1992, that the USS Midway was commissioned. And then as you go through the lower deck, you see the cafeteria and you learn how many tons of food have to be prepared each day. You see the laundry room to make sure that the sailors looked appropriate in their attire. And then we walked by a room that's smaller than most of our classrooms here at the synagogue. And on it was a sign, and it said the chapel. Now, most people that walked by that room simply walked by and continued on the tour. But two rabbis on the tour of an aircraft carrier where it says the word chapel, we entered. And what we found there was a really beautiful thing. There was a stack of Bibles from all different faiths. You really couldn't tell if it was a synagogue or a church or a mosque, but it was a sacred place of prayer that you knew had an important point in our history of this country. And besides the two of us, there was one man that walked in. He walked up to the altar, to the bima, to whatever it was for him. Vayipol al panav. And he fell to his knees and began to pray. Now, I can't tell you what he prayed for, but the thoughts came to our mind. Maybe it was for a sailor that he knew that had served on the USS Midway. Maybe it was for somebody that he knew in uniform today that was actively serving duty. Or maybe it was for the prayers and hopes of his children, that one day a time of peace could come. As you enter the USS Midway on the hangar floor, where they basically did the maintenance for the airplanes, there's a gigantic sign that greets you. And it's the words of General Douglas MacArthur. He says, I quote, "No man is entitled to the blessings of freedom unless he be vigilant in its preservation." When I read that, I immediately thought of ourselves as American Jews on this aircraft carrier. Because what is a bracha? What is a blessing besides thoughts and prayers? We recognize the freedom as a bracha, a blessing, but we preserve it with those thoughts and those prayers. Each and every Shabbat, which we just did here on page 177, we say the prayer for our country. And if you think that it's just a new prayer in our prayer book as Americans in 1776, then you'll be mistaken. Because if you look at the history of a prayer for our country, you can go all the way back to the 14th century in Sefer Abudraham, which was really one of the first commentaries on the modern prayer book. And a prayer for our country is in there. It's not a prayer for the United States of America, but it's a prayer for any country that a Jew would live in. And we know that even though governments have shifted and Jews have lived in different countries, that prayer has always remained in our Shabbat service. In my own lifetime, there's not one Shabbat that has gone by that a synagogue in this country has not recited that prayer. Because when we say those thoughts and prayers, we recognize the dreams of those who served in order for us to say those words. And we pray for the dreams that will be. Last year, on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, Rabbi Reznikov, the retired captain in the Navy, stood in the Capitol building before Congress, and he recited this prayer. It was the eve of 9/11, but I think it's as appropriate on this eve of July 4th. He prayed, "We assess, atone, improve. But regardless of religion, Americans now share holy days, blessed by memories of the righteous who kept faith alive. We reunited to rebuild as we must unite today. Our beliefs attacked, we celebrate unity, diversity, and hope. Silent prayer. Then God bless America, we sing. May unity then inspire us now, heeding America's liberty song. Join hand in hand, brave Americans all. By uniting we stand. By dividing we fall. As Jews who live in the United States of America, on Monday I hope we see some fireworks in the sky, and maybe even eat a hot dog or a hamburger on a blessed barbecue. But let's say a prayer of thanks for the thousands of those who served so we can stand here today. A prayer for those who proudly stand in uniform today so each one of us can be engaged in respectful debate of this thriving democracy. And a prayer for tomorrow, that we can stand as one, indivisible under God, with justice and liberty for all. For when our great teacher Moshe Rabbeinu felt powerless and in fear, vayipol al panav, it was his simple prayer as he fell to the ground that allowed him to continue. And for 50 years on that USS Midway, I can only imagine how many of those sailors walked into that chapel, vayipol al panav, and fell to the ground in prayer. And so this morning, let us rise. Let us rise to our feet as we are joined in song and prayer, as we sing a prayer for this country. God bless America.